How's this? Where do you want it?
So they're actually working on some
Yeah, very lucky to be
Josh, can you get some of
Do you want to start? Just put that on so everyone can see it? No, not for that sounded like a really good idea, Mike. Going to get the foot tomorrow. So.
Tell me all your secrets.
But yeah, I can see what I can't tell you too much. Started by there was another rush. I want to be
Actually, now it's easy because it's distinguished. But sometimes I want to go outside
Because down here, the couch, there's this things here too. If you want to.
I think they got rid of the fish.
Yes, it's morning.
Okay, guys, thank you very much for joining Software Crafters, the first meetup of Software Crafters after 2 years and 9 months. Crazy, right? To be like on this area without having to worry about COVID. I mean, COVID's still there, but who cares, right? So just a little bit. We don't have an official code of conduct, but of course, be nice to each other. We usually have discussion about fundamentals of software, about technology stuff, and the ego remains outside, and then you can pick it up when you leave. We just come here for an interesting conversation, interesting sharing of ideas, learning, and all that. If you have any concerns in regards to the behavior of anybody, you can talk straight to me, or you can talk to Tony. Where's Tony? Tony is right there, right? Or there with him.
Surrounded, so.
Yeah. So, all right, we are recording this meetup because a lot of the people who wanted to join couldn't because they are overseas, and also we'll publish this on YouTube. So if you have any concerns about the use of your image, I'm sorry. No, I'm joking. So let us know, and also we can do, see if you can hire a professional to blur your face, probably not. Okay, but be aware that you're being recorded. All right, so. My name is Wagner. I'm one of the organizers. Tony also one of the organizers for tonight. And I work at IAG as a software engineer contractor. That's okay. Introduction. What do we do? I would like to thank Tony for being here and helping with stuff. Josh from Network IT for helping also. Quiller to be hosting allowing us to host here, and also the beer, the pizza. They're the guys, right? And Pragma Team, which is the company that made this community be born here in Sydney many years ago, which also manages our meetup subscription. All right, what we do usually is in the beginning of the session, we decide the next session topic, right? Now, we didn't do last time because actually we did. It was event sourcing, but COVID came, so I wouldn't start over. And those, we have a GitHub link that you might have received by email. I emailed everyone. And those are the topics that we have on the issues tab in GitHub. You can add your own. And you will eventually find its way in one of the meetups here, and you'll be able to help decide what will be the next topic for the meetup. Now, I've decided this one about COVID and distributed and all that because, it makes sense given the circumstances. And now I want you to help us to decide the next topic for the next meetup, which is date and location to be decided. We have a few ideas, but we don't have yet location, but we can decide topic. So I have some pencils here. Okay, somehow you open this. So I've got two here and plus some of them for the adventurous ones. Come over one by one and then just put here the topic that you want to talk about. It can be like a stick. I think you do sticks, right? In Australia, each country is different. So there's the topic. Let's talk about our failures. Topic number one, no number. Microservices patterns, running open source projects. Agile, it's on the same team. So Agile, CI/CD, how to really do it. Dojo on event-driven reactive approaches. So who doesn't know, Dojo katas are like workshops and exercises that we do, which involve bringing your computer and etc. and actual coding, not just talk. So domain-driven design, soft skills, and I'll put here event sourcing because I crossed it out, but never happened because of the infamous. So we were going to do event sourcing eBay office in 2019, I think. Gumtree office in York Street, and ended up not happening. So I'll put the topic there. Just to make sure we know which vote it was, I'll just put some rows here. Okay. Cool. Yeah, please come in. Maybe you can start from here, and then you can cast your vote. 1 vote each. Just put a.
Only one.
Yeah, because a lot of people. Pick the one interested you the most, and then throw you.
How to really do that apply to agile as well?
No. There'll be a separate topic. You can put an issue saying both, and then we can discuss.
I'm just not on the topic.
Cool. No worries. Yeah. And then you can pass to the next one. So what is that? No need that. The format's to be decided, right? It could be like one is very specific, like Dojo or event driven, so it's already on the top. But the format for the other ones could be the standard Fishbowl, or you can decide something else. But I think it's up to us, and people can suggest some issues, right? The issue for each of those topics can suggest the format, and we can probably use that one.
Which one would you? Somewhat. Yeah, I like that. And you that's us.
Nice, we're doing a beautiful scrum. And one is finishing, another one's getting the pencils.
Yeah.
So anytime the event's gonna happen, you are gonna be
I'm supposed not to be drinking, but I.
Oh, no. That's because on YouTube. It is so good.
It's like Australian elections. First one is the winner before the election's over. Just one. One vote. No more than one. If you try to cheat, the first one already won.
It's a landslide. Pull
Still 3 votes left.
Talk about failures. Yeah. And the next topic will be about failures. Reminds me of a thinking that I read LinkedIn. Don't think about your failures of yesterday. Think about your failures of tomorrow.
How will I? Oh, let me count.
Okay, everyone voted. All right, awesome. Cool. Let's talk about our failures. That's the winner. So that will be the next topic of the meetup. If you want to suggest a format that's not Fishbowl, please go to the GitHub repository in issues. You can put a comment, and then it's better because you do the work for us, and we have less work to do on the side stuff. But we will do the work and decide the format. No worries. Okay. So today's topic will be the challenges of a distributed workplace, how COVID-19 shaped the way we work. Interesting. So the format will be a fishbowl. So I've talked about fishbowl quite a lot, and some people might not understand what it is. So a fishbowl is a form of conversation, right? Where it allows for a big group to focus the conversation in a smaller group, right? So for example, these guys here that choose this chair without even knowing, they pay the round of beers after. No, I'm joking. That's how we spoke. Yeah. So what happens is, Usually it's a lot of people around, like the parliament, that example, right? But it's like a lot of people around, and there's a small number of people in the center, and all the conversation, the topics, and the discussions can only be discussed between people who are in the fishbowl, right? Everybody that is around, silence, just listen, absorb, but that doesn't mean that they are the dictators of what to say, right? There's always one chair that is free, like let's say, there'll always be three, they're already there, you're done, you start. So there's always this chair here, right? You decide for yourself, right? At any point in the conversation, remember, whoever is outside, do not speak, but you can go, get up, sit here, get up, and I'll sit down here. When I sit down here, then I'm part of the conversation, but there's a problem. There's no other chair free. So someone needs to go up and go to the audience, and, so that there's always one chair free. If nobody gets up, the discussion is really fervous. So the person who is in the bowl for the longest time has to get up. If that person doesn't get up, they have to get up, okay? So those are the rules, all right? And it's very important that for this to work, those rules are respected. If they do, you'll see that something magical will happen, right? You will observe a lot of information. You have the opportunity to come in, to add something, and there won't be like clusters of conversations happening around where I'm in one cluster, somebody's in another cluster, and I cannot be everywhere every time. So everybody focuses and the discussion happens around here. Any question? No? Okay. So what I'm going to do, I've got a few notes here. Let me check my notes. Okay. All right. So you three, right, are in the bowl. And there's one chair here. And we'll start now. I'll try to ask a question to the bowl so that you can start some sort of conversation. And if you stop or, things are not really interesting enough, I'll come up with another conversation to kick off and that. Everything the subject of distributed workplace. So in your opinion, right, what do you think there are the main challenges that you found with distributed development? How did you fix those challenges? Please.
I could probably talk about the project that I'm on at the moment. So basically, I work for a consulting company called Pragmaty. Not to make you feel awkward or anything. And we're basically based with clients. So we go and work for a particular client for like a year or something like that. So I'm working with this particular client who has a bunch of developers in Brisbane as well as Sydney. And I guess, an obvious problem there is that sometimes you might not, depending on how the communication goes within your team, you might not immediately know what everyone else is up to at any given point. Which was especially apparent in a very recent case, maybe like a week or two ago when we had to demo, like we had this presentation to prepare for, that was basically going through the entirety of the app. So we have like the front end, and then we had we had like the backend services as well. So basically from the making calls to the backend. So I've mostly been focusing on the front end. So I was busy looking and making sure that the front end was okay and everything was fine. But then it turned out that for some reason it was never really properly communicated. I heard from one of the other developers in Brisbane who's more for like a backend developer, and they said, "Oh yeah, we're going to make some tiny database changes or something in Slack." And I was just like, "Okay, hopefully it shouldn't affect the demo." But then the day after the demo comes, and 1 hour before, I try logging into the app, and I'm just like, it's not working for some reason. So when I was trying to figure out what was going on, I figured out that there was a change in basically the structure of the database was changed in such a way that I wouldn't be able to log in the front end unless I made some pretty radical changes. So I had to do fairly quick refactoring in like half an hour, just to make sure that, you know, the demo went smoothly. So yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is, depending on how the communication in your distributed team works out, if you're not there and you're not really seeing what other people are doing, if it's not communicated effectively, then yeah, you could probably run into issues like that when the left hand isn't the right hand is doing that into issues.
Was the organization of the work split based on location, or was it just an individual change? That was...
Yeah, I mean, I'm not entirely sure. It's a good point. Basically, we had this thing where, again, we had this front end back end separation, which honestly, usually I'm not really a fan of anyway. But we had this decision made where the more back end developers would be the two who were in Brisbane. And then we had the front end developers, me and someone else in Sydney. It just, we were like I said, we're a consulting company, so we were brought on to work on the front end stuff, me and the other person in Sydney.
And how do you think that you could avoid that? I mean, that misunderstanding.
No, that's a good question. And it probably really depends on the organization team. So a bit more, I guess, background is that the stuff that we're presenting was kind of like a proof of concept thing. So things weren't really formal. Things were moving really fast, and there wasn't a lot of structure to what we were doing. So like no Jira, no nothing, none of that, like tracking of issues and stuff like that. So we weren't using these kind of tools at all, really.
So do you think that if you were using that kind of tools, it won't happen? I mean,
I feel like at least we should use a Kanban board or something like that to track these kind of things. Again, it's very early stages in the project overall. So then maybe there's a thing of like, if I make this change, it's not going to affect so much. But I guess, you know, there was a bit of stress, unfortunately, because of that situation where we had to be like kind of scrambling at the last minute for demos. Probably something that could have been avoided with that kind of issue tracking or something like that.
Does the demo have to be using a live service that's being actively developed on? Like normally if I was doing a demo, I'd want a snapshot of code that works on its own in either like a development environment or locally or whatever it is, so that you can avoid that issue, because you could just use the older version of code, right?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, we didn't have like different API versions or anything. Like I said, we were like in a kind of this proof of concept stage where, yeah, we just had this one, basically calling it like a QA environment that we're working against. Yeah, at this point, we haven't really gone down the route of like multiple environments and stuff like that yet. But yeah, that's probably something that we are going to be building in the future.
it's really interesting because, I mean, we're speaking about using tools, but how about our communication as a team?
Yeah, I mean, how do you do that kind of communication?
How we use GitLab. I'm working for a company in Peru. I'm from Peru, Latin America. So sometimes we are using the microservices. We are building some microservices. Yeah, I mean, the code and the versions are in GitHub. But what about if we don't have these tools? How we improve our communication in the team? How we, because there is this like a soft skills and no one's, you know, mark in that. And probably it's just one. Probably it's really important. We are not machines.
True.
At the end of the day. Yeah.
Did you have frequent communication, like daily meetings or anything like that?
I mean, we did the daily stand-ups, but that was about it. This particular thing that happened, this database restructuring, whatever, it wasn't really captured as like a task to do. It was more of this kind of like a side effect of some other work that was going on. If that makes sense. So I guess when it comes to that kind of thing, it's like a side effect of like the real objective. It might be easy to lose sight of it potentially.
Yeah, I feel like generally, if you're like with a team that you work with a lot and trust, you should know that, or you should be able to communicate around like breaking database changes, right?
Yeah.
Whereas that sounds like it might be more of an organizational thing between like being hired in to an existing environment, right?
Yeah, there is that, and that's a whole other can of worms about just I guess the industry that we're in and what the experience is like for a consultant developer like me versus someone who's more like in-house and that kind of thing.
I think
This sounds like something that I experience in like a normal office environment where everybody is in the same space and working together, but it's just, there's too many things happening at the same time. You just can't be aware of everything. And then when I depend on certain backend service, which depends on some other backend service, and somebody makes changes in there, and then everything in the chain breaks. It's just very difficult to avoid these situations without actually knowing who's working on these services and are there any changes coming.
Yeah.
I don't know, like if there would be anything to solve this problem, like extensive monitoring that shows if everything is up and running, or like change logs that you get all the time. It's easy to access them. You know what's actually changing there, and especially when you are working on something and changing something, you are creating this document. Okay, this is what I changed. This is what's broken and deprecated now, and this is how you need to call the service from now on.
Yeah.
I find that interesting. The other part I was thinking is being remote exacerbates the problem. That, you know, oh, you send a message, oh, this is not working, send a message. Have they seen it yet? Why are they not replying? And if someone was just across the room, hey, what's going on? But that sounds like it's actually been, you were all in one location, you still had.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about a company where you have 400 people, there's quite a big office, so you can't just walk around the office and talk to people because, oh, they are not here, they are not sitting by their desk, oh, they're in a meeting or something like that. So they're always not available, so they might be busy with something else. So I think.
So it sounds like continuous integration.
Yeah, maybe
you had that,
yeah.
that was constantly deploying into real production, that systems could have flagged it.
But it was a good point earlier that if you're doing a demo, then I think it's good to warn the other teams that, oh, I need to do this demo, please don't break these systems.
Yeah, I mean, I guess another thing to add, just like something that we talked about now, is like, because obviously we talked about this problem afterwards, was that there was this feeling that this demo wasn't really that important, that we wouldn't be showcasing the entirety of the thin slice, so to speak, so like from like the front end to the back end. There was this, like one of the back end developers had thought that that wouldn't actually be happening. So again, maybe there's another communication here in terms of the importance of the demo, because it was literally all the work that we had done to that point in the entire project for like the last 2 or 3 months. And maybe it wasn't, again, communication, right? It wasn't, there was feeling that that wasn't communicated properly, the importance of the demo. Yeah, so.
That's one of the things I find interesting, like since COVID, this hybrid model, everyone wants to work hybrid, and you talk to candidates, and the first thing, one of the early things I ask you, what's your hybrid model? But well, it's all nice not to have to travel and fight commuting every day, but there's that overhead, that cost of, you know, that barrier, the lower bandwidth communication you get when you have remote communications. And I really value co-location and kind of swinging around and say, hey, Fagner, can you help me here? What's going on? Or I'm just curious what, you know, this, are we being lured into this idea of, okay, great, I don't need to you know, travel as much now. But then suddenly you have this friction added in, you don't realize, and it's quite frustrating.
I think one thing is also the culture, how open the culture is for communication. Like, are we talking to each other openly, or are we just sitting there with our headphones on and looking like, please do not disturb me? Because if everybody's sitting there with the headphones on and not really paying attention to anything that's happening around them, I don't think it's any different than working remotely.
So I think one of the things that we've kind of highlighted is we used to have a policy where everyone had to come to the office, and then obviously that had to change very quickly. One of the things we highlighted that the communication has become a lot more deliberate and purposeful and kind of structured. Because as you're sort of saying, like you can't just turn around and tap Fagner on the shoulder, but like that's where I think things like daily stand-ups and having this culture around, like, yeah, just hit the call button on Slack anytime and people feel hopefully answered, like really helps. It's like, yeah, particularly the CI/CD kind of environment, right, where things are constantly changing, moving. Like if you don't have this deliberate flow of communication and information between the teams, then any silos that were already developing are going to start throwing up walls and everything becomes a lot harder.
That sounds very familiar.
All right. Do you miss the office?
I miss being around people.
Do you miss the office? You know, you come in and join.
I miss, yeah, same. I miss the social interaction between people, especially like coming here. Oh, there's people. I don't know any one of you, but it's nice to be here anyway.
Yeah, and the water cooler chats,
Yeah,
going down
yeah.
the kitchen, making a cup of tea and just seeing
But
meeting other people.
But things like commuting to the office, finding where to go for lunch, and there's a long queue, and or buying expensive coffee and that kind of stuff. No, I don't miss those.
Sorry.
It's all good.
I don't know. It's funny that because I actually started learning to code properly in an office environment after COVID happened, right? And when I was in the office and I was actually having people to help me with any silly question I had, it was so much more easier. It was like simply, I don't know, for someone that's learning, that's in the beginning of their career, I think being in the office, being close to someone, my development was a bit quicker when I was working. I was working in a mixed kind of system where I was working 3 days from home, 2 days in the office. And I started going every day to the office because there was always be someone there and there was always something I could learn. And my experience was when I was in the office, I learned much more quicker than when I was at home. And I think that I'm not really sure why is that, because I haven't been in the industry that long to see how it used to be before COVID. But I just feel that like some people, they are better for teaching when they're close to you, you know, otherwise they just get distracted with their own priorities. Principally seniors, they would have many priorities, they'll get distracted with that and they won't give you as much attention when they are in as if they were in the office.
Do you think you were more comfortable asking questions when you got the person there like next to you, or do you find it easier doing it remotely, just sending some Slack message?
I think you kind of build that relationship as well when you're in the office, right? You cannot ask someone working remote time, do you want to go for a coffee? You guys want to go to the kitchen with your cameras on?
I don't miss being in the office at all. And like, I agree that there's an issue there with like transferring knowledge and learning and teaching, because like you can't replace face-to-face communication with anything, unfortunately. But I think generally like, I tried, like when I was like in the team I was managing, I tried to set the expectation that like, it doesn't matter where you work, because when I work on code, I'm like at home, isolated, or I'm at my desk with my headphones in, which means I don't want you to come and tap me on the shoulder, right? But this, like, I think there is a benefit to having maybe not coffee time because it's impractical, but after work drinks or food or events even like this, meetups and stuff like that you can go to as a team. And I found they build culture way faster than anything else. So I agree that like nothing will replace face-to-face training and coaching. I think you can alleviate a lot of it if your seniors care a lot about how much help you're getting. But for me, like the benefits of going to coffee together aren't outweighed by open office planning and people talking and all the noise that comes with it.
No, I agree on that point. Sometimes it's annoying. Basically, I don't know, you start to get used to stay at home and like the silence. There's people talking around you, you just get confused sometimes. Well, I don't know, it's just a changing market as well. Like I think the solutions are not still properly introduced to change this. We are working at home. What we're going to do to interact? We're going to have to go to the city for a beer, or there is something else we can do?
Yeah, and that's the part that I was thinking. Like, I don't mind like working from home, but I still think you need some level of co-location where you can. It's not like insane to go out for a beer or dinner after work or something where you can like build team culture. Because if you're in like a different state, then that just basically never happens, right?
I think it's easy to just look at work and out of work relationships as disconnected sometimes, but we've just had a retreat where we all went to Noosa, and that fundamentally I think then changes. It lays like a relational foundation for how you'll then actually work technically together, and I think it's easy to underestimate like those foundational connections you build, a bit like what you're saying with just going for coffee and the interconnection between the two. So just having those opportunities to build those human-to-human relationships does actually then make it a bit easier to reach out remote. So that's what I think in terms of missing the office, it's missing those sort of relational foundations, opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I have perspective on this as well, kind of similar, because I recently moved here to Australia like 4 months ago. And at the beginning, we were all just like working from home. So that kind of made it difficult because then, you know, you're on top of being a new company, you're in a new country as well. So you have to deal with this kind of thing about like getting to know people and stuff like that. That can be quite difficult to do like on the online. And yeah, admittedly, there's this whole thing about got your work people and then you've got your outside of work people. But I think a lot of the time you can develop pretty good connections with work people in such a way that you can hang out with them even out after work sometimes. Or, you know, and I think ultimately you get on better as well, because I feel like after meeting my coworkers in person and having a chat about other random things, and yeah, I do feel more of a connection to them. And I think we probably get better work done as a result. Yeah, because I know what they're like. So.
I mean, the nature of remote work is it's text. Yeah, it's like a two-dimensional video. There's so much more nuance when you're talking with someone face to face, and you can sort of see the body language. And I think there's just something there about better understanding the person, and you get to know them, and we don't always use the right words, so people kind of start to know us and know what we mean. And I think that's why, like even remote, it's really important if there's a miscommunication, say over text message, to then go, hey, we should get on a chat. But
especially if you're doing some code review and you don't agree much with that approach, then you need to kind of elaborate more, like choose some nice words. Or I feel like, in my honest opinion, I feel like it's kind of tricky. But on the other hand, you kind of develop some soft skills, let's say in that case, like more like writing skills. But yeah, it can become tricky. But yeah, I think the best way you can do is just, I don't know, just talk to someone, not in person, but face to face. It's also kind of annoying sometimes. You just write some comment there that you don't agree with something, and then someone just hurt you on Slack. But then you don't see their faces. No, I want to like a face-to-face. Yeah. I want to see your face to see your reaction, because you are discussing something, not about agreeing or disagreeing, but to learn.
Yeah, I think that's why I see face-to-face, like in-person communication. I think it's high bandwidth communication. There's so many things you pick up. Your body language, you know, am I saying something that kind of you can adjust your communication so much better? And it's, for me, at least, written word is I have to be very careful what I'm saying. Like I said, it's really easy to misinterpret. So I actually write more, just make it crystal clear, because I don't want that back and forth. And I mean, not that remote doesn't work. Clearly it does, because, you know, a lot of open source projects do it, but then you also have huge flame wars, and that's the kind of trade-offs you always make. But at least within, you know, a work environment, I think, if I can, I don't need to pay that cost now. Just get together, we can take advantage of high bandwidth communication and kind of really like I said, get to know each other quicker. Which I think, I was wondering if people are aware of that trade-off that they're giving up. If they just say, okay, it's much more convenient to be remote and so forth. But
yeah, the thing is, with COVID, a lot of companies, they became remote. They weren't remote before. So they kind of, I think that's remote. So let's be 100% remote. Yeah. There are some companies there, like GitLab, for instance, they've been remote for 10 years. They know how to be like, how to do async work, which is different. Yeah. They know how to, their process are modeled to be remotely, to be async. So that's different.
Yeah, they have a lot of protocols where it's remote first, where I think, I find when there's asymmetry, where you've got a group of people in the, some in the office and some people are remote, that asymmetry is really hard, you know, because there's a lot of side conversations and then people in remote don't know about it. And it's like, can you guys don't get it? And then, or it's like, right, we're gonna have to write out everything we just said, document it again. Yeah. So if you're kind of remote first, and that's quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, to tell a quick story back in the day. So what was it, Atlassian previously? And we had Trello who joined the Atlassian family, and they were like remote zealots, you know, and in a good way. And they would have rules like, if there were a boardroom, like say up there, everyone would sit there separately on the laptop
Yeah.
logged into the meeting because there were just a few people remote. And I think for the rest of the world, they thought, oh, okay, that's a little, a little over the top maybe. But I think that the rest of the world, and even the rest of Atlassian, when COVID landed, caught up, they understood the necessity of those kinds of things because it was a good ripping off the band-aid of, or you have to be in the office because that's where all the decisions are being made. So like there's about physical location, but then there's also that, being where the action is and where all the important decisions are. And so that's brought many people into the office then, but it forced everyone to have to go, no, we have to make decisions like remote.
So it's the lowest common,
right?
it's the lowest common denominator, which again is a trade-off, which I think as long as it's consciously chosen, that's okay. It's just sometimes you fall into it because it's so attractive and not have to commit and so forth.
Just to your point as well, like another funny story, like it's quite funny when you are discussing something technical. Let's say you have a front-end layer talking to a back-end layer, but you need like Nginx somewhere sitting there, but you can draw, you don't have a whiteboard. So the cache will be here, Nginx will be sitting here up here. Here's the front-end layer, CDN here, then whatever. So everything here, there's a microservice here. You need to be creative. A lot of creative process.
Yeah, I mean, years ago, even just having a distributed team, I used to have the webcam facing towards my whiteboard, and I'll be up there. But that's still kind of one way, It's like I've got the pen, I'm drawing. Everyone else has to watch my whiteboard.
One thing I did try when at one company we had a remote office in Boston and London. You had this remote window where you had a camera facing both ways, trying to build a connection. But people were really uncomfortable with it, which is quite interesting. I thought, it's just a window, right? You just could see the other side, you could know what it's like. But people would just kind of avoid it and kind of, which is, I thought it was interesting. The hardest thing with remote back then was the time difference killed us. You kind of, between that time zone, you do something and then you go off and you might send a message, all right, this is why I'm doing this. And next day you come back, what the hell are they doing? Why did they not do what I told them to do? And the context probably changed and probably good reason. And if they didn't kind of write down their reasoning, then you just get really angry. And then you do things and they'll probably get really angry the next day. And that was really hard to remote and the time zone differences.
Yeah, time zone is an issue, especially in Australia. You can't co-work with someone else. Pretty much, AST time zone here. That's it. It's terrible.
I found like one of the things that affected whether I'd be having like a good day or a bad day remote working was like the kinds of social protocols that people in my team follow. So like if it's someone who prefers to just kind of keep chatting in a Slack thread for like forever, obviously the conversation's not going to go as well. But if you have someone who's like, oh, this is going on too long, let's just jump on Zoom and we'll figure it out, then that tended to work better. But like not everyone knows how to communicate, I think, about the protocols that they prefer to follow, and not everyone values them in the same way. So like I speak to people who have teams where they're like, oh, we just got rid of stand up, we just do it in Slack now. And I was like, so I wouldn't want to work in a team like that because I just wouldn't get to talk to anyone.
Yeah.
People would be like, I'm so lonely.
I found that recently. One of my colleagues, I realized actually he communicates better when he's got a bit of time to kind of, you just go to him, hey, Bob, what do you think of this? And he'll be like, he knows, he's got an opinion, he knows an idea, but it's just when it's sprung on him, he doesn't process quicker. But then so I find sometimes I just do it asynchronously because then you can have opportunity to think it through and come up with a response. So it ends up becoming, I guess what, people are different. And you kind of have to find out what's the kind of most appropriate, but it can kind of swing too far as well, I think, from in-face communication and kind of finding that balance.
All right, so I have another question to keep the discussion going. It's a very good discussion, we like it. So everybody knows about Conway's law, the structure of the the code tend to mimic the structure of the organization. Now, the question that I want to ask the Fishbowl and someone to occupy the chair there, has your ways of working changed your architecture or the way you code and architect your system? Please come in from outside.
Sorry, Mike, can you repeat the question?
So has your ways of working changed the way you architect your system? Change your architecture? The new ways of working distributed?
Yes.
That's why you came, huh?
Yeah. So I'm going to start maybe a bit from the software thing, but the Conway's law thing often gets misrepresented. It's not actually about the structure of your teams, it's about the communication styles between those structures. And their architecture tends to mimic them. And consciously or not, we used to have a very, like, we're very microservices, you know, so those weren't everybody's like these days. And when we were together, a lot of those microservices were very chatty to one another, like usual HTTP calls and things like that. And like consciously or not, as we've gone remote, and our own communication has become more asynchronous via Slack, we're actually moving to a lot more event-driven stuff. So event buses are sneaking in, we have data streams, a lot of things are more like, the downstream system will get to it when it gets to it. Like we'll trust it, it'll sort itself out. We're also seeing those kind of those structures form around some of the teams and where they're placed. It's like the guys who are looking after one part of the system, they're all based in Adelaide, and like their system is very much grouped together and it talks to itself. But then if you need to talk to them, it goes over the event stuff instead. A lot of the Slack communication.
I think that's the way we've been evolving as well at Quilla, because we're a bit of a hybrid model. So we don't sort of say everyone has to come in every Tuesday or Thursday. We try to encourage, hey, within your team, maybe work out whether you're going to be co-located occasionally. But because you don't want to say that to everyone, it sort of means that people interact a lot within a team, and then we try to separately figure out times when like everyone, you know, is going to get the opportunity to interact. But I think the result of that is it then becomes more convenient to have that sort of microservices culture where teams are owning services, and it's definitely more convenient going down that microservices path than everyone, you know, simultaneously doing projects that are all hitting up the monolith. So I'd say that's where, you know, microservices and remote work do align there, and monolith-based development.
Yeah. I'd like to think our services have become more robust because of that movement, and then hopefully the team as well. It's hard to say really. Like most of the time these days, our problems tend to be quite contained. So we work in payments, so it's nice when things don't spread out across the payments network. So like if the accounting module blows up, it doesn't take everything else with it. So I mean, that's one of the kind of positives we've had from this model. But let's say it does mean knowledge gets quite siloed. So like I said, people can be making decisions that aren't spreading between microservices. So I guess one example of the problem we've got is one of the teams decided they were going to pick up a very specific JSON schema for all the REST APIs, and nobody else did. So we've got this one model that's like super specific to this specification, and everyone else is very still cowboy with it. And getting that spread across the system and be adopted by all the other communication layers is a challenge at the moment, given how busy everyone is.
We had, I think, a few different effects, I guess, from moving to remote work for our architecture. Like, so one thing that happened was back in the past, whenever there'd be a new team member who would join, it would just be like a whiteboarding session of like, here's how like all the services we have and how they're connected. And it wouldn't be super detailed, but it would just kind of be enough. But moving to remote work, we found that like, okay, let's document this properly. Like we're gonna have a diagram that we're gonna add to and keep updated. And because our architecture was a bit crazy at the time, that proved to actually be a really good thing to do. And because like, I think pair programming also wasn't much of a thing in the office at the time. Being able to be like on a Zoom call and presenting your screen and then maybe swapping with the other person, or if you have like, you know, a tool to be able to work together in the same environment, meant that just changed the way that we worked. And so it meant that like if we were working on a new piece of like the architecture together, then like two people could be doing that at the same time, and then they would be able to like feed into each other's sort of thoughts about whether this is a good decision or bad decision, whereas before it was more one person would go it alone. And yeah, but yeah, the funny thing is that now that we're back in the office, we're like so much more open to what other teams are doing. Or when we were remote, we were just like, this is our team, this is what we do. That's it.
I found that really interesting what you said about. So it sounded like remote actually made pair programming.
Yeah,
easier
it's
or more
pretty,
attractive.
it's pretty weird.
Really weird. Yeah, I'm a big fan of pair programming, but I thought, oh, remote, having the headphone on, and it's really intense. Pair programming is intense as it is. Being just staring at a screen for one, it would have been quite hard.
Yeah, my eyesight's gotten really bad. Yeah, it's super tiring.
It's really interesting. Is it because you using tools that you both can have a cursor and both control open different files and stuff?
I think so. I think there's a bit of like physical awkwardness with pair programming in person because you're both sitting there like, can I touch your keyboard? Are you okay with that? Like, and like, you know, how close can we sit next to each other? I need you to like increase the font size by like 5, please. Like, all these kinds of things which kind of make you like regret that you even consented to pairing with that person in the first place in some instances. So yeah, like you just don't know what people's social protocols are. So
right.
Yeah,
I think we did it. Each one had our own separate keyboard, but yeah, I can see the font thing. I would struggle. Well, that's really interesting. I think I might, let's try that. Try to push it away. I think maybe also, again, I'm stereotyping where maybe engineers like to be headphones on in the little dark room, like a guy in your IT crowd and so forth. And it's easy to be inclined for that. So sometimes I'm fighting more like, talk to each other, guys. Don't send messages while you're sitting next to each other. And then I'm thinking, well, if you're remote, oh gosh, here we go. Everyone's going to go off in their own little thing. And then is it going to fit together? I really hope so.
All right, so you talk about pair programming. That's interesting. Was one of my notes. So I'll try to ask a question about something simpler than pair programming, more programming. Much simpler, right? Has anybody had any experience in more programming in a distributed setting other than pair programming, like more than 2 people in one task at one time? Question to everybody else too. Please come in.
We did something sort of like that. I guess it was tough because distributed, like you can't have many people talking at the same time online. So that was the main challenge. We were doing like a project where we're like building a database from scratch in Go. And we kind of just rotate like it'd be kind of the next person in the Zoom list as to who could talk next. And I think people were like really nervous because it's almost like, you know, you're on the screen and everyone's watching what you're doing when you're in the hot seat. So yeah, that was my experience with that.
I feel like mob programming should be technically easier in a distributed environment because you don't have to worry about like a projector or like font size or huddling around a single computer or anything like that as much. And pair, you're meant to go back and forth, right? But mob, you're meant to just have one person driving that's not thinking, basically. So that should apply directly to Zoom calls and whatnot, I think. So I think realistically it should be easier, and I've only ever done really like refactoring work as mob programming and only distributed, but yeah, it seems much easier than switching back and forth between who's controlling the code and who's not. On the previous point as well, I think if you like within a team, you can work however you want, but if distributed working is a problem because you can't communicate with other teams to do your work, I think that's a symptom of more like monolithic environments or environments where you need to know a lot more than what your team manages to deal with the code on a daily basis, which I think is like probably something that should be worked out regardless of whether you're in an office or remote.
I think it's something you can minimize. I don't think it's something you can always eliminate, right? Because there's always going to be the wider context for how the product works. It's like for us, like I said, payment to people, like no matter what part of the product you're working on, you kind of have to have some knowledge about it. So even if you're only working on like the bookkeeping and accounting side of it, you still have to understand how the payments flow. You can't really get away from that. But it is nice if at least those interfaces are separate. So it's like, you know, if I need to delete a payment or create a payment, I don't have to worry about, I have to fill in these things and put them over here. It's just, let the payment service deal with that.
Yeah, it makes sense, especially because like payments is across all your productization, and
Yeah.
there's some things that are like that. I think the example I think of is like in Amazon, when you go work on the S3 team, you don't need to know what every single service is and how it works. I don't think that would like scale, but it depends on what you're doing.
Yeah.
All right, got the chance. Somebody can come and join the discussion. Maybe a more open question, as specific. What are your best practices for efficient distributed work that you believe are worth sharing?
So for us, that's always being willing to take a call. Like, great if it's a video call. I think everybody in our team does video calls rather than audio calls. Not always super practical, because obviously people have like home lives that they don't want to keep in the office either. But that's been super important for us, particularly with people who have been remote the whole time. So they've never been to the office. One guy works in New Zealand, so he's probably not coming to Sydney anytime soon. So yeah, that's a big one for us. Like cameras on, I think is a useful one.
Yeah, I agree. Setting the standards of like camera on and like you Slack back and forth for 2 messages, but any more than that, you should probably Zoom or something like that. And then having team-based Zoom channels if you need to, so people don't have to worry about like, where's my link or whatever, just putting it in a central place. It's like, here's your Zoom link if you want to talk. I think stuff like that's really good. I miss having whiteboards as well, but I've become like a lot better with drawing tools, which I think is in the long term better because you can save the file in a drawing tool, but you can't, like saving a whiteboard is really annoying.
One thing that usually when you have a meeting, regardless if it's actually happening in the same room or in distributed form, like you should always take some notes and try to share the notes with everybody who's involved and everybody who needs to know the details, because otherwise the information kind of stays in there in the conversation, and 10 minutes later you go and make some coffee and you forgot already half of it. Yeah. So if you want to share the information, it kind of needs to be written somewhere.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I don't really have, it's more of a question really in terms of just going back to the thing about the video calls. Like I so far I found out not everyone that I work with is receptive to those. So I guess my question would be, if you encounter someone who doesn't want to do a video, who doesn't want to put their video on, how would you deal with that situation? Would you try to get them? Would you try to tell them about the, you know, the advantages of having their video on or something like that? Like, how do you deal with that?
Prevention is the best cure, but I think like if you're coming into an environment where the culture is set that people don't have to use cameras or do video calls, then it's hard. But in my experience, like hiring into my team was like, this is how we work. And that includes like your Slack is a picture of you, not a cartoon. Like in meetings where you do video calls, everyone's expected to make notes, which is another thing. And yeah, like managing the expectation, because tech is good, but culture comes first. And if you set that from the start, generally it's hard to find people that will argue with you.
I think tech is very irrelevant if you don't have the culture that actually supports getting things done and doing things in the right way. And what comes to the camera, I think it should never be mandatory to have your camera on. I think it should be a recommendation to please keep it on if you can. But if you're feeling like that, oh, I just don't want to show my face to anybody at the moment, so be fine with it. Like, I don't think it should be somebody from management that says that no, you have to put your camera on every time when you join a meeting, or disable it using some kind of a corporate policy. But yeah, I sometimes, usually I keep my camera on, but sometimes I just don't feel like it.
Yeah, I agree. Like as long as you have a reason, like if you're not dressed or you're not feeling well or whatever it is, right? Yeah. As long as it's not every day, like I don't want to put it on. I think that's the hard part about cultures. It can't be mandatory, but you've got to set same defaults. Like I expect this level, but if you're having a bad day, then don't worry about it. Don't come to the stand-up if you don't.
Then I think that the huddle in Slack is actually pretty good because it's just audio by default, but you can still share your screen if you need to.
It's because of her question. I remember a situation that happened on my team. We had this guy working from India, and he never would turn his camera on, never. And then one day, someone from the team were alone with him in a conversation and just asked, "Man, why you don't like to turn your camera? Like, do you have? There's some reason." And then he explained every time when he was working, it was really late, and he was really tired. He didn't want to put clothes on to talk, and it was really funny because my manager, he had this idea. Said, "Guys, today I just want you guys looking like shit. Everyone from the team gonna turn their camera on like they wake up, you know." And so everyone's gonna look really bad, and it was really fun because we did it like kind of as just to show him that no one cares how you look on a meeting. They just want to see your face, talk to you. And we did that, and it was the first day, and we didn't told him about that, right? We just did that. And it was the first day that he turned his camera on. So it was funny, right? So I don't know, I think like someone mentioned here before, people are different, right? Principally now that we're working remote, we're going to be expanding how different are the people we work, because before we had these radius of kilometers that we have to work from. Now we can work to anyone, anywhere, right? And I think cultural barrier, for example, I'm Brazilian, I live here in Australia for 6 years now, and I've been learning that for the last 6 years. Many cultural barriers will come, but the best way to face them is always, the more you talk, the more you learn what's the cultural barrier and how to pass that, right?
I've found out that when you're working remotely, or even when you're in the office, it's useful to actually get to know each other in a way that, like, in one job that I had a few years ago, so we had this weekly session in my team that we spent half an hour just, okay, get some coffee and some snacks and donuts or something nice, and sit together for half an hour, and you get to talk about anything in the world except work. So that was a really good way to get to know people, what they like, how they are outside of the work context. And I think this is something that also works remotely. You can have these sessions over Zoom or Google Hangout or whatever tool you're using. I hope you're not using Teams, but anyway. Just do these things, play some online games together. We've done things like in my previous job, so we had two-day workshop, and we didn't tell the high-ranking manager about our plans. We agreed beforehand that on the first day, everybody's wearing a suit. And then when the manager joined the call, he was like, what is going on? Why is everybody wearing a suit? And then the next day we had a dress code that, just wear a bathrobe or something like that. It was actually pretty fun.
So something we did as well, something that we did know that we do every day. In the morning stand-up, we have like 10 minutes before. It is not necessarily 10 minutes, right? Depends on the urgency of the day. But we talk about anything that's not related to work. Someone have something to share, and they start talking, and it's funny because some days people actually talk a lot, and the subject kind of like takes longer than it's supposed to do. And like people are getting to know each other a lot, and the manager have to bring them back and say like, guys, just go back to this stand-up. But this interaction, I think that was the whole point of the idea, right? That interaction is actually happening every day.
Yeah, I agree. I used to do it on Friday afternoons so that it could go for as long as you want, because no one has to get back to work or do anything. And you know that everyone's there if they want to be, because they could just hang out. And you can also have a beer, which is always nice.
All right. So the questions that I asked the Fishbowl were your best practice, well, in order. What are the main challenges you found in distributed development? How do you fix them? Do you miss the office? Has your ways of working changed your code architecture? Then we went to the about more programming, pair programming, and your best practices for distributed work. And then we kind of hooked into some funny situations that happen on working in a distributed way. We're gonna continue on the best practices of distributed works, and we'll probably tell some funny stories that I'm pretty sure everybody has about distributed work after the break. So 50 minutes break, and we'll come back after with those two questions on the queue.
Yeah.
Check it out.